Welcome, Organic Matrix members, and today is a special day. We get to speak with Dr. Michelle Gordon. This episode is going to serve the people who are afraid to change careers, and those who are going through burnout, and those who feel trapped by the expectations of those around them, like mentors and parents. Many people feel trapped working a job that they have no passion for. How can we take steps to break free from these expectations that influence us growing up? After this episode, you'll feel more confident about chasing your passion and launching your life. Dr. Gordon ran a multi-million-dollar surgical practice from 2005 to 2020 and grew it to 5 surgeons. She was burnt out from many sleepless nights and the overall lack of empathy for doctors by the corporate medicine. All the overnight calls, lack of sleep, and generalized discontent with medicine led to severe overwhelm and burnout. Her life, as she knew it, was no longer sustainable, and then COVID hit. She walked away from her successful practice to recover from burnout and overwhelm. She discovered suffering is optional, and it's possible to heal from burnout quickly with the right tools. Dr. Gordon is also the host of podcast Launch Your Life. It's the only mindset podcast that provides weekly actionable insights for lasting happiness and change for high-achieving professionals who are ready to bounce back from burnout. Now, she's pivoting into a newer and more encompassing mission to provide weekly actionable insights for lasting happiness and change for high-achieving professionals who are ready to bounce back from burnout. Welcome, Dr. Gordon.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
It's an absolute honor, and it's a privilege to meet you. Where are you from?
Well, that's such a loaded question because I've lived on both coasts. I grew up in Washington State, southeastern Washington State, in a small town called Richland. And if you want to know more about it, just go and listen to episode 161 of my podcast, the Launch Your Life podcast, because I talk about the history, which is fascinating. And when I was 20-ish, I moved to California, lived in California for 16 years, went to medical school and college there. And then I started moving across the country while I was doing my training. So I was in Chicago for a year, and then I moved to New York, and I've been in New York since 2001.
What is the differences that you see living in New York City and then coming from Washington?
Well, first of all, I don't live in the city. I live in the suburbs. I'm only about an hour away from the city, so it's still pretty city-like. So I grew up in a really small farming town in Washington State, and it's not so small now, but it was also a think tank, and so there's a really high education expectation in that town. But things aren't. It's just really different because people in New York are really jaded, and and people on the West Coast are much more caring. And I think and it's not that people in New York don't care, because they do, but it's just a different type of caring. And then the topography, for me, it's so difficult, especially in the winter when even though there's no leaves on the trees, you just can't see anywhere. I mean, I come from the desert, and so I'm used to seeing miles and miles and miles. And here in New York, you just don't, the Northeast, you just don't see that. And so it's been a challenge. Yeah.
Well, I'm born and raised, grew up in New York, so I could agree to your statements. I much love life in the South or away from the smog. How is it like building a multi-million-dollar surgical practice?
It was really interesting building that practice. As I started to grow it, I, obviously hired surgeons. And the big discovery for me was that I did not like leading surgeons. I found that, surgeons have to be competent, right? Not only are they opening your body and fixing you, but they also have to have a lot of confidence. And sometimes that confidence translates into arrogance and the unwillingness to follow the leader. And so it was really, really hard to lead surgeons, and I hated it. And so as I started to realize this, it made it easier to kind of wind down. And I mean, some people always are easier to lead than others, but when you're an employee, you kind of have to do what the boss says, and a lot of surgeons have a hard time being employees.
How did you find the surgeons that you worked with?
Oh, I advertised. It was, sometimes I used a headhunter, and sometimes I just advertised and word of mouth and that sort of thing.
That's amazing. So you had like your own private practice, and you gathered all your people on your own. That's incredible. Yep. What inspired you to go from being a surgeon solo practice to opening up a practice with multiple surgeons?
My goal was to really leverage my time. I wanted to replace myself in the practice, and that proved harder than I thought it would be because there was a lot of resentment from the other surgeons because I was trying to really remove myself and become more not academic but more administrative. And there was a lot of resentment from the other surgeons about that, and I don't know if it was just like not clear communication. I mean, I don't know now. It doesn't matter because I closed the practice.
I recently had an experience of starting a business. It didn't like last too long because there's a lot that goes into it that it's hard to see from the outside looking in. And
Yeah.
I experienced a lot of like being like 25 and then having like the people I was working with working under me that were the same age. They were like, I felt like they thought they could do what I was doing better.
Yeah. I think that for me it was, you know, the burden when you have a big team or when you have, you know, professionals working for you is sometimes it was scary because, you know, I had to make payroll. And as Obamacare came and then surprise bill laws and medicine really changed, getting the money in became more and more of a burden. And in fact, I'm still owed millions of dollars by health insurance companies that, you know, I'm still in the process of trying to get 5 years later. So the system in America is built to not pay doctors. It's built to collect premiums and not pay them out.
I'm really grateful that you can tell us how it looks like to be a doctor. Yeah, so I would love to, break down how you were able to step away from something like you invested so much time in.
Yeah. So, uh, one thing that I talk about on my podcast is how I created this belief that I needed to become a doctor. And what happened was my mom, when I was a little kid, was talking about her two brothers who were doctors. And because as children, we want to make sense of things we hear, what I did was I heard my mom say they're doctors, they're rich. That was really the thing. And my mom really valued wealth. It was really important to her. And so I kind of adopted that and thought, you know, I want to make my mom happy. And I built this belief that the only way I could make money was to be a doctor. And that program ran in my subconscious probably until the end of 2018 when I uncovered it. And I realized that it was, you know, kind of bullshit. And making money isn't just related to being a doctor. There's lots of ways to make money. And so as I undid that belief, I started to really look at my life as a doctor and how, you know, while I was really good at it, it wasn't really aligned with who I wanted to be. And that's how I started planting the seed to be able and started making kind of, you know, plans to get out of medicine. So it was a couple year process to get out of medicine, but COVID was enough to because I'm in New York, and in New York, nobody was surviving. It was, and then it wasn't just the fact that people weren't surviving, which is demoralizing, but it was the way the hospitals treated us, and really just locked us out in a lot of ways. You know, it wasn't like they trusted the doctors to not come in with COVID. You know, they closed a bunch of entrances and made you check your temperature, and it was just, I just wasn't going to live like that.
Yeah, it seems to be very unfair on both sides, because being on the patient side, I see one story, but I have a lot of friends that are nurses and people who are on the forefront in the hospitals in the city. And also what was crazy is I was able to see my mom's text messages, see like her data, see what her experience was like before she was unable to speak. And it was mayhem. You have nurses and doctors working ungodly shifts, like getting no break. How can we expect our healthcare providers to give us the best care if they have no rest?
Well, that's true, and that is, doctors are. It's not just that. I mean, the way that there's a double standard. I mean, between the way that administration looks at nurses versus doctors. Doctors are expected to work for free. Nurses are expected to work for pay. They don't pay doctors by the hour. I mean, it was really interesting to see how they expected doctors to volunteer their time, but they were paying nurses bonuses of up to $10,000, and it's just a double standard.
Mm-hmm.
And not to say that nurses aren't worth it, because they are, but we go through a lot more education, and the cheapening of the word doctor to provider, and all of these ways that the doctor moniker has just been devalued over the years by insurance companies, by administration, and for every hospital and healthcare system now, there's about 5 administrators for each doctor. I mean, why?
Yeah. And I also thought it was strange that there was some doctors trying to offer ivermectin, like different styles of medicine to help people. It was very shocking to see doctors get crucified in the media for trying alternative methods when we're faced with disease. Like, it's the doctor's job to use their knowledge, their years of practice to prescribe us medication. Nobody ever bats an eye when someone's prescribed opiates, but like when you go to a doctor for COVID, in the past, you'll tell them your symptoms, and it's like they have no medication they can give you. They're like, oh, it's COVID, there's no medicine. Like, that's what would happen in the clinics I would go to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that because we want to practice evidence-based medicine, and there still isn't a lot of evidence for ivermectin. The monoclonal antibodies seem to work, and remember, when COVID first started, it was novel. We had no idea how to treat it, and we didn't understand why people were having multi-system organ failure, and why the blood was so thick, and all the things. And it took us some time to figure it out. And so I just think that when confronted with alternative therapies, I think that there are alternative therapies that don't involve prescriptions, right? So ivermectin is not an inert drug; it's still a drug. And so one of the things that came out of China was vitamin C, and so people started taking more vitamin C and zinc, right? So I think that we have to really weigh the truth of treatment versus the evidence before we decide whether doctors are doing the right thing or not.
Before you reached your level of success, did you ever think about quitting?
I did. I tried to leave medicine several times. When I started the job that I was in, I'm not in it anymore, but it was hostile. And one thing that I did not understand as I was going through medical school, because I made a lot of really great friends in medical school, was that as you become a professional, there's a lot of jealousy among doctors, and doctors become your worst enemies when you're a doctor. And so if you're making more money than the other person, or if you're doing something different than other people, there's just the other people will do their best to tear you down. And when I first opened my practice, there was one guy who was like the main guy there, and I met with him just so I could meet him and talk to him, and he said, "You'll never make a living here." And that was my introduction to surgical practice. So it was really hostile, and it wasn't fun. And I got to a point where I was the busiest surgeon, and I didn't have any help, and I had it. And so I took a break and went and did some locums for a while, and then I went back and enjoyed a lot of success.
Is it like competitive? Like,
yeah, doctors are super competitive with each other, and especially similar specialties. So yeah, it's super, super competitive. And even if you're not in the same specialty, if you're in an adjacent specialty, say GI and surgery, there's a lot of jealousy. That's my personal experience. I mean, that's anecdotal.
Yeah, I mean, I never expected that, because I would think you guys all have similar interests. Like,
yeah, there was a lot of competition for patients. Yeah, a lot of jealousy. So yeah, I mean, it's just maybe that was unique to my place where I was working, but that was certainly my experience.
How did you treat your burnout symptoms during your 16 years of residency?
So I didn't have 16 years of residency. I had 5 years of residency, and it was a 15-year kind of process from starting college, I think. 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of medical school, but I did actually 6. I did 6 years of undergrad because I went to junior college, so that's why it's 15, and then 5 years of residency. But I wouldn't say I was burned out after residency. I got burned out after working on my own and taking a lot of call for 5, 6, 7 years, and the way that when I was talking about the competition and the hostility really was hard for me, and I didn't have good communication skills back then, and so I didn't know how to process it. And when I took a break from it, I just took some time. I mean, back, before I went back to work as a surgeon, I took some time, and then I went and did some locums, and that helped my confidence because I was really good at the skill. And so when I went back to work at that hospital, I had a lot of confidence, and that made it easier for me to grow my practice. But I worked for 15 years as a surgeon, and when I stopped working in July of 2020, I threw myself into my new business, actually, and thinking that by just going into action, everything was going to be good. And what I really realized was that throughout the pandemic, it took me a couple years to understand what I really wanted to do and how I wanted to help people. And I initially started helping people in menopause because I thought that was where there was a lot of need. And while there is need for help for women in menopause, I realized that it isn't about menopause, what I can do to help you. It's really about the opportunity that menopause gives us for reinvention. And it doesn't even have to be menopause. I mean, anybody can reinvent at any time. It just has to do with uncovering the beliefs that are holding you back.
I was watching some of your podcasts, and you mentioned that like when we hit puberty, we get this talk. I remember seeing that you were saying that we get prepared to hit puberty, and we get these books and we get the talk, but then when we hit the age of menopause, there's no talk. Like it's just okay, deal with it.
Yeah, and it's really, I mean, menopause is really can be a really disruptive time for women, and for some reason there's not a lot of discussion about it. It might just be because of the way Hollywood deals with aging women, and magazines and whatnot. You start to get wrinkles, you may gain some weight, start to feel maybe not so great about yourself, and we don't want to talk about menopause. Nobody wants to admit that they're in menopause. And so it's what I like to say about menopause is that, obviously in menopause, you're going to lose your hormones, right? That's what happens. And anyone who tells you can balance your hormones in menopause is feeding you a line of bullshit. Mm-hmm. There is no possibility you can balance your hormones in menopause because you're going to lose them. And it infuriates me because it's just predatory marketing. So I like to tell women that menopause is a natural rebalancing of hormones, and you just kind of got to work through it. And there's help for it. You can take some hormone replacement, but in reality, there is a natural rebalancing. And then once you get through it, on the other side, when you're postmenopausal, it's really not that bad. I mean, you still get hot flashes sometimes, and it depends on what you eat. Can make it easier to gain weight, but at the end of the day, menopause does not have to be that disruptive.
What are some ways that women can regulate get used to the changes happening in their bodies with menopause?
So I think that the couple things you can do and this goes for anyone. We eat a lot of foods that are disrupting to our hormones. And so I recommend that everyone get off of any seed oil. So there are 6 of them that are really bad: corn, canola, cottonseed, soy, safflower, and sunflower. So if you can get off those oils, your hormones are going to be much more healthy because fat is the building block of hormones. So we start there. The other thing is refined sugar and refined carbs. When you're just feeding your body all of these refined carbs, your pancreas never gets a rest. And so then you can develop what's called insulin resistance. And that's why we have so much type 2 diabetes in our country. So those two lifestyle modifications can really affect you down the road and can make menopause a much easier time for you if you're young. And if you're in menopause and you stop those things, you're going to feel better.
Those tips are great for like everybody, even men, because the sperm count dropping so much in the United States has to be contributed to these seed oils and these processed foods. And
yeah, I mean, America has a lot of things that are illegal, in our food that are illegal everywhere else in the world. And I've seen, again, anecdotal, but people who go to other countries eat exactly the same foods, Cocoa Puffs and, whatever they are, right? They eat the foods off, the snack foods and things like that, and they lose weight because they have different chemicals in them. A lot of the chemicals are not allowed.
What? They lose weight eating the same way?
Eating the same way, yeah.
That's incredible.
That's just how it is. I mean, America's food policy, remember, it's really important that we wake up to the fact that America is the home of the corporation and the land of the prophet. So it's not really the home of the free and the land of the brave. And it's not about, pulling yourself up by the bootstraps or anything. It is truly about corporate profit. More than anything else, the whole government is centered around corporate profit and corporate greed. And so when you can wake up to that and realize that, then you can realize that all the advertising that you're bombarded with every day is really just, it's designed to get you to consume.
Yeah. And
you're not going to be happier with more stuff. You're not going to be happier with more stuff. More stuff does not do anything for you. What can make you happy is having a lot of money in the bank when you retire. And that comes from living below your means and saving.
I think it's so true. And to bring that to story, like when I was little, because the thing is, as an adult, the way I see it is like we're always like the same children. We just grow a bigger vocabulary. Like,
yeah.
So, but when I was younger, I used to have to go to my grandmother's house every Saturday when my parents would go to work, and she only spoke Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. I speak broken Spanish, but so there was a language barrier, and I'd be bored. But the times where I would bring all of my toys, like 25 different toys, it would be like too many options. Like I wouldn't even use them. I was overwhelmed by all the things I can do. But the times I brought like 3 toys, maybe 2 toys, I had the most entertaining time, like the best time. And like I learned very young that having more isn't better. Sometimes it's overwhelming.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great insight. The younger you can be when you start to realize that, the better your life is going to be as you grow older.
When did you start adopting the way you saw how corporate works? When did you start seeing like
I think that happened for me when I started realizing that insurance companies were out to not pay me as a doctor, and that even though I provided care to their their insured that was life-saving, they would deny the claim because that was just the standard thing, was to just deny claims. And trying to get paid became, I had like 5 people working all, full time just on denied claims.
Wow. Yeah. That makes me have so much more empathy for my co-payments and like not missing them. That you make me more grateful for the system that we do have. And like, I'm glad that we're having this conversation because a lot of us just take it for granted. America, I think that's our biggest problem here, that we have so much that we don't know how to pay homage to it. Like that's why I respect cultures that fast and go through sacrifice, because it makes you realize how privileged, how lucky we are. Like 1,000 years ago, we didn't have the stability and the level of medicine that we have now. So
Yeah, that's true. I think also though that when you look at every other developed country in the world, they have universal health care.
Mhm.
Every other developed country, and the reason why we don't is because of the insurance lobby. And if we could get rid of the insurance lobby and the for-profit insurance companies, we would have more than enough money to fund, uh, universal health care and still, pay doctors a decent salary.
At least give you guys a scholarship. You're gonna be healing us. So after you left your surgical practice, how did you begin to heal from burnout and find how you really wanted to serve your community?
Yeah, so I threw myself into my work, and I realized that I was doing work that wasn't fulfilling to me. And so I took some time off and did some traveling, and I actually did some soul searching. And to tell you the truth, sometimes recovering from burnout feels like shit. It really does. I mean, I drive a Tesla, and I took it across the country because I was tired of New York winters and I was done doing a New York winter. So last February, I drove from New York to California, and I just took this time to think about what I wanted in life and try and get an idea of what I wanted my life to look like. And then I did uh, I did something with my online business, and it just did not work. And I went into a depression. I tried to figure out like what is going on. I just took a break from everything, and even my self care. Like I wasn't exercising, I wasn't doing the things that I normally should do, and I spent a lot of time thinking about what it is I wanted in life and how I wanted my life to look, and that time between say March and May is where I realized that I need a lot of freedom. I need to have a business that allows me to help people, but also gives me freedom to do things that I like to do. And one of the things I've realized I really like to do is bake. And so I started baking sourdough bread and making desserts and things like that. And that's been a lot of fun just to have a creative outlet that doesn't have anything to do with my business.
That's awesome. Sourdough bread is my favorite.
It's hard. It's I mean, I haven't perfected it, but it's been good.
So what is launch your life your current passion now besides?
So yeah, so I had I've been podcasting since June of 2019, and the podcast was called Menopause Movement, and so there's a lot of menopause content in my podcast. But starting in January of this year, or maybe a little bit later, maybe it was February or March, I can't remember, but we changed the focus of the podcast because I realized that what I'm super interested in is mindset, brain science, and how and the process of change and how we can really get ourselves to do things that we want to do. Because if you know how you want to feel, but you're not able to get yourself to take the action, I mean, think about it. All the things that you want in your life, right? You think about it, you think about it, you think, I want to lose weight, but you don't exercise. I want to lose weight, but you're not eating the right food. I want to lose weight, but you'd having pizza every night, that kind of thing, right? So that's just one example. But or I want to have a thriving business, but I'm not spending the time doing it. Or I want to declutter my house, but I'm not taking time to do it. And as I started to realize that this was what I really cared about, like helping people create effective change in their lives, effective lasting change in their lives, I went to talking about launch your life, because there is a lot of opportunity everywhere throughout your life that you can reinvent yourself. And as I started looking at my own history, I saw that I have been reinventing myself over and over and over since I was probably about 5 years old, and seeing how my brain protected me and made it so that I could look at life from a different perspective. And as I started to realize that, it was like, oh, well, this is perfect. And so we changed the name of the podcast, started talking about mindset, and then about 5 weeks ago, I embarked on a memoir series. And so now I'm just telling stories right now of my life. And the reason I'm doing that is because I wrote a memoir in 2018, 2019, something like that. And I just left it. I never did anything with it. I just wrote it. And so now I was like, oh, well, I can do it on the podcast, and people can get to know me and can kind of understand some of the struggles I went through, and that I'm just as human as everybody else. And so it's been really interesting, and it's been enlightening for me, and I think for some of my listeners.
Oh yeah, I'm a personal fan of your memoir series, and I can't wait to listen to more of it. And you guys, you Matrix members, you have to check out this memoir series. It's like putting on a VR set without the VR set. Like, it's so descriptive. It's like you're right there with Dr. Gordon, and it's inspiring too. All the things that you managed to pull strength from, and like that you really seem like an unstoppable person, because it's not that your life is perfect, but it's the fact that you have the resilience and the the strength to bounce back. And I pay homage to you,
Huh,
and I
thank you.
honor your story. Thank you for being generous with your personal history.
Yeah. So if you're going to go back and go to look at the Launch Your Life podcast and want to just do the memoir series, start with episode 161.
So how can we know the difference between burnout or needing a lifestyle change?
Um, I don't I don't know that there is. I think that if you're burned out, you need a lifestyle change. I don't think that there's a huge distinction between them, because you can get burnout from work, from having a shitty boss, um, or from just working all the time and never taking a break. I mean, that's one way to develop burnout. But another way is to not sit with yourself enough, not really get to know your thoughts and how you talk to yourself, and understand that the way you talk to yourself is probably causing a lot of your emotions. And so I would say that if you're feeling overwhelmed, or you're feeling burned out, that the first thing that to do is to look at your habits in your life and see what kind of habits you want to change, decide where you want to go, and then start small. Start small and decide whether, well, this is right. Is this going to take me closer to my goal or not? And then do the thing that will.
I think a key thing you said is like defining a goal, right?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing about goals. Goals can feel really um they can feel really out there, right? Like I want to make $1 million. Okay, great. But I'm only making 30,000 a year right now. So how do I go? That's more than a, what is that? Like, that's 30x plus, right?
Mm.
And so how do I go 10x or 1x? How do I double my income? So we've got to start with realistic things. And it's not that you don't want a big, hairy, audacious goal, because you do, because a strong vision is going to pull you forward. You want to have a really strong vision, but you've got to get the things that are realistic, that you can control, right? So what can I control right now? I can control my thoughts. I can control, how I'm feeling. I can control whether I move my body. I can control what I put in my mouth. And so when you start to realize that, and start to understand that the only thing you truly have control over in your life is your reactions to things, then you can start to say, okay, well, this is how I want to react to this, and this is how I want to react to that. And I'll tell you, I used to think that I was fat all the time. Now, I still have body dysmorphia. I still look in the mirror and think I'm fat. I'm not going to say that stopped. But what I did was I would look in the mirror, and every time I looked in the mirror, I said, I hate you. I hate this body. I hate you. And I sat with that, and I thought, if I had a kid and I told my kid I hated them, would they be motivated to take action to change the way they looked? And of course, the answer was no. And so I said, well, how can I get myself to take action to like my body more, rather than just like gaslighting myself into saying I love myself, right? So what I did was I said, every time I look in the mirror, I'm going to say, even though my mind might say, I hate you, I'm going to change that to I love you. And then I'm going to make sure that I take an action every day that's going to take me closer to taking care of my body. And that worked. That was at the end of 2018. And by 20, 2019, 2020, I was running 5-6 miles a day, and started to feel a lot better about myself.
Incredible. That's a lot of stamina. I love what you said about like comparing it to if you were talking to a child. That was something that I had to do, and I love how it comes back to like the inner child that we're always have that inner child within us. And when I was healing after my mom passed away, of course, a lot of things surface. You have memories, and you start to look at things a different way. And I realized like I was speaking to myself the way she used to speak to me. But then now that her voice isn't there, I was able to actually make adjustments and change my tonality and accept that I could heal from certain memories that used to weigh me down. And like,
well, I mean, every one of us has a child in us, right? And one thing that we forget, right? So if, let's say, like me, you were the, you were the sexual object of somebody as a child. And if you want to know more about that, go and listen to my podcast. I talk a lot about it. But if you've decided that you're just going to be a victim, right? And that this event happened to you, and it is, because of this thing, all these things are up in your life, right? Hope I can say that.
it's okay.
Then what's happening is you're letting a child run your life. And if you want to, think like a 6-year-old or 7-year-old or 10-year-old for the rest of your life, that's great. Go ahead. But as an adult, you have the opportunity to go back and parent that child and actually talk to that child about how they can forgive. And when they forgive, they get free. Forgiveness isn't for them, it's for you. Because when you forgive, they don't have power over you anymore.
Do you think on some level forgiveness is conscious?
Oh, I think it starts consciously, yeah, and then you have to work into subconscious. Yeah. Forgiveness is like is really layered. It's multi-layered.
Yeah, because there's things in my life like I want to just forgive. Like consciously, I'm like, I want to let it go. I don't want to react to it. I don't want it to touch me. And I think the more that I tell myself it's okay, I could let it go. Like 1 centimeter, I like let go a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's so easy to fall right back down the ladder, like miss a step.
The reason for that is because your brain wants to think the same way all the time, and so you have to give it a pattern interrupt, and you have to pick a trigger, kind of like what I did was with the mirror, right? Because I just had this thing from my childhood. I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. And I had to make a trigger. Like every time I look in the mirror, I have to say this to myself. And so we can change our thoughts, but you've got to remember that we've got Grand Canyons of thought in our mind. And the only way to change it is to create a pattern interrupt. But you also have to be really, really gentle with yourself when you don't do it. Because if you're saying, oh, damn it, I suck, I can't, then you're not gonna get it done. And so it's really important that you are forgiving to yourself first. The brain's job is to think, and it's just going to think over and over and over. And, you think about it, we have at least 60,000 thoughts a day, and 90% of them are untrue, unhelpful, and, bad. So we have to think, we have to find a way to kind of steer our thoughts into the positive.
Do you see yourself as a coach?
I'm a coach. Yeah.
Do you have practice for clients right now?
I do. It's called Launch Your Life.
Oh, so
Launch Your Life coaching program.
Can our listeners, like if they would like to work with you personally, they can find you through Launch Your Life? And
yeah, so you can go to discover.drgordon.me, and there's a little questionnaire you can fill out there, and I'll read it, and then we can have a chat afterwards.
Oh, that's so special.
Yeah, just put in your you put in your email address, then we can work out a time to talk.
I love that.
Yeah.
What do you advise for those who feel stuck doing something they hate doing?
Wow. I think that what's important for this is to really get a clear understanding of what you don't want, so that you can get a clear understanding of what it is you do want. And so when you decide what you want your life to look like, when you are actually able to sit down and think, I want my life to be like this, and then you can start to take inspired action toward it. But in my experience, the best way to get this done is to hire a coach. And I've had amazing coaches in my life. I've had shitty coaches in my life, but all of them have taken me closer to my goal.
I love that. When did you start incorporating coaches into your life?
first time I hired a coach, it was 2010. Maybe, yeah, it's 2010, maybe 2011.
So do you stick with one coach for a long time? How does that work?
Well, the first coaching that I hired was a 20-week coaching program, and it helped me decide like how I wanted my business to look. And it wasn't business coaching, it was life coaching, but it made me want to really help me get clear on the fact that I was working for a corporation and I hated every minute of it, and I would be okay going back to work for myself. And it gave me the impetus to reopen my practice after I'd closed it for a while and gone to work in locums, and then I took a job. And I reopened my practice in 2012, actually, and I made more money than I'd made in my whole life.
That's awesome. I love that. That's a great testimony.
And that's when I was able to grow the practice. Between 2012 and 2018, I grew it up to 5 surgeons.
So there's a lot of value in getting a little bit of help.
Oh, yeah, without question. How
can we take steps to break free from past or current expectations from those around us?
Well, I think expectations are it's such a trap, expectations, because expectations are where suffering starts. So suffering comes from unmet expectations. And so it's really important to check your expectations. Now, that's not to say that we can't be responsible for the people we're responsible for. Like if you have children, you got to take care of your children. I mean, it's expected, right? So there are societal expectations that are important. But when you really understand that the only person that can make you happy is you, and you get happy from looking inside and finding the things inside. And trust me, it's not money. Now, you got to get a certain amount of money to start to feel happy. But then after a while, more things doesn't make a difference. More money doesn't make a difference. It really is about finding your purpose from within. And you can actually see how this happened with Oprah. So if you look back, I mean, some of you are probably too young to remember when Oprah got started. But, Oprah got started she was an anchor on a Chicago news station, I think. She got fired from that, and then she started her talk show, and she was able to grow her influence and make a lot of money. But you can see that she started just talking to people, and then she started talking to Dr. Phil, and then she started talking to thought leaders in the spiritual space like Eckhart Tolle and people like that. And what I think is so interesting about that is that as you get your basic needs met, you start to have the opportunity for self-actualization, and you start to look for a greater purpose and a greater meaning. And when you do that, you can start to examine the thought patterns, the beliefs, everything that has welled up from your childhood. Remember that every limit you have in your life is in your mind. And the sooner you start to understand this, the sooner you can break free and create the life of your dreams.
I love that you brought that up, and that's something that I talk about a lot with my friends and family, where we have to get out of this survival mode. Like, doesn't know life outside of anxiety and impending doom, but they don't know better. They had that impending doom their whole life. I was the one privileged to not experience that. I got to see the shadows on their walls and not really feel the heat of their flame. And it's hard because I have to have gratitude. At first I used to get frustrated. I'm like, why do you guys act like that? But now I'm like, I have gratitude. I'm like, well, thanks for sacrificing all that for us to live a different life. But then I pray for her healing. I pray for my family's healing. Eckhart Tolle and into it, because he talks about this in the New Earth book that he wrote. And it's that we inherit these roles and we kind of forget about our identity, and we adopt society's identity, and then life changes. I'll have to find myself again.
Yeah. I think that, and that's another reason why I started talking about menopause, because we have this opportunity in menopause to really look at our identity. Like, who am I now? My kids are gone. Maybe my marriage broke up. Maybe my marriage is stronger. But who am I now? And so it's a really good opportunity to reinvent yourself or to relaunch your life.
What's some advice you can give someone who is striving to satisfy a parental view? and
Oh,
dedicated years to it, and then now they want to change their mind, find passion.
well, I mean, I think that my story is really a testament to that, right? I realized that I became a doctor because it was something my mom wanted. Is that my 5-year-old self wanted to please my mom, and at the end of the day, while I made a lot of money, it wasn't very fulfilling. So I think that it's really important. Usually, once you find your purpose and your passion, the money follows. And so it's so important to feel aligned and to feel like you're really living in alignment with what your true calling is. And it might feel real shitty for a while, not knowing what that is, and trying to find your purpose. And I read an exercise once, like, what is my purpose? And you just write down things until you cry. I never cried, right? So, like, what do I think one of the ways to find your purpose is to think about things that just come really, really easily to you, things that you take advantage of, but people come and get help from you for. And that's one place to really start to take a look at what your strengths are and how you can double down on those.
Oh, that's fantastic, clear advice. And I love it. It aligns with what I'm doing now with the podcast because in the beginning, I was like, I don't want to go to college. I feel like if I dedicate the amount of time, effort, and energy that I would be doing reports and talking to professors, I was like, but when I do a report, only my professor sees it. It's not going to get published. I was like, there has to be something else to do. So I started writing my own reports, putting them on my blog. And I started podcasting because I want to talk to inspiring professionals like you that I could directly learn from. And because I always loved talking, and of course it was difficult to think, well, how am I going to get paid to talk? Like, how am I going to sustain myself? But you're right. Like, once you find your passion, the money follows. And it is frustrating because it takes a long time. But like, the important thing is what you said, the personal expertise and like feeling confident, and then knowing that the little thing that you're doing helps someone somewhere.
Yeah, so just remember that, yeah, I think other than professional rules that require certification, like doctoring and lawyering and things like that, almost any other knowledge is available to you for free, on the internet. And there's the only reason why college, I think, is important is because it takes you along a path where you have accountability, and you can probably do a lot of the same stuff with a qualified coach who can keep you on track. And so it's really, I mean, especially for young people now, if you want to learn how to code, you can just go to Google School, and it's free or maybe low cost, and you can just start to learn how to code, and then you can go and make a couple $100,000 a year. So there's really, I don't think, any reason for college unless you want to do a profession like doctoring or lawyering or physical therapy, something in the healthcare field, something in the professional field like that. But I don't think you really need it anymore.
We're in the age of the creative being right now. It's incredible. This is a great time for people to have opportunity to adapt to the technology coming. Because since the Industrial Revolution, people were like, these robots taking our jobs. But there's a lot of free resources out there. We don't have to be stuck.
Well, I think it's important to remember that the reason why we have the education system the way it is to teach us to follow bells, because that's the way they wanted people to be able to work in a factory. And so the education system that we have in place in our country is designed to create factory workers. It's not designed to create independent thinkers. And so if you want to be an independent thinker, you want to really start to question everything that anyone ever told you, because it's just a truth. It's not the truth.
Right. Dr. Gordon, we're ready for some rapid fire.
Right on.
What's your biggest failure and what did you learn from that experience?
Oh man, I invested in a startup, too much money into a startup. And what I learned was to rely on financial advisors when it comes to investing.
That's great advice. I wish I did the same. What star sign are you?
I was born October 25th, 1964. I am a Scorpio.
Yeah, water tribe. I'm a Pisces.
Right on.
What is a common myth about your job or field of expertise?
So I can talk about medicine, first. So my former career, and that is that I think the commonest myth is that doctors are like know-it-alls or are arrogant, and I think a lot of us really just want to help you.
Mm.
And what's happened with the cheapening of the doctor name and the consumerism side of it is that we've really lost our autonomy. And doctors as a whole just want to get you better. That's really our intent. But it's not our fault that we're taught sick care because it's designed that way. It's designed to teach sick care and not well care, healthy, to make you more healthy. It starts in medical school. And I think the common myth about coaching, especially life coaches, is that a lot of life coaches don't really know what they're doing, or that it's like bullshit, right? And I've had therapy and I've had life coaches, and I paid therapists a lot of money, and I've made much greater strides in my life when I had somebody who was pointing out where my beliefs were holding me back. And that's what a life coach can do for you.
So, Dr. Gordon, can you tell us more about the services you offer now and how our audience? I know you briefly mentioned discover.me.
Discover.drgordon.me. Yeah, that's how you can you can fill out. It's a questionnaire, and then that's how you can get in the pipeline to work with me. I offer a quarterly. It's called Launch Your Life, and it's a quarterly thing where we figure out what we want to get done that quarter, and then we break it down into monthly goals and weekly goals and daily accountability, and then we meet once a week to talk about it and to work on our mindset. So that's one aspect that I offer, and then I have a kind of a Launch Your Life Self course that's an 8-week cohort, and that is really getting down to your relationship with yourself and how to make it the best relationship in your life, and then what does that look like, and how are you going to impact the world, and what kind of legacy you want to leave.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gordon. And to our listeners here, you know you're going to be in good hands working with Dr. Gordon. She's going to provide you the tools to build the confidence to see your vision. And I'm personally curious about it. Well, thank you so much for your time, Dr. Gordon. And I would look forward to possibly working with you again in the future.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
It's an absolute pleasure.